Torah and ethics. Nuggets 3. Learning and growing. You know what? Let us criticize Abraham and Sarah. Let's go for it. Abraham's decision after arriving at the land of Canaan to leave and go to Egypt because there was famine in the land was wrong. Our father Abraham unintentionally committed a great sin by bringing his righteous wife to a stumbling block of sin on account of his fear for his life. He should have trusted that God would save him and his wife and all his belongings, for God surely has the power to help and to save. His leaving the land concerning which he had been commanded from the beginning on account of the famine was also a sin he committed, for in famine God would redeem him from death. It was because of this deed that the exile in the land of Egypt at the hand of Pharaoh was decreed for his children, some argue. Abraham's decision to leave was not his only error. He also put Sarah in a position of moral hazard because, as a result of going to Egypt, she was forced to tell a lie in saying that she was Abraham's sister and not his wife. She was taken into Pharaoh's house, where she might have been forced to commit an act of adultery. Is there more we can say about Abraham's mistakes? Of course. Despairing of having a child, Sarah asked Abraham to sleep with her handmaid Hagar in the hope that she might bear him a child. Abraham does so and Hagar becomes pregnant. The text then says that Hagar began to despise her mistress. Sarah complains to Abraham and then afflicts Hagar, who flees from her into the desert. Our mother Sarah transgressed by this affliction, as did Abraham by allowing her to do so. So God heard Hagar's affliction and gave her a son who would be a wild donkey of a man to afflict the seed of Abraham and Sarah with all kinds of affliction. What is the moral judgment here? Sarah's conduct does seem volatile and harsh. The Torah itself says that Sarah afflicted Hagar. It is not difficult to defend Abraham and Sarah in these incidents, as some commentators do so. How are we to judge the patriarchs when their behavior seems problematic? How do we approach Jacob taking Esau's blessing in disguise, for example, or Simon and Levi's brutality in the course of rescuing their sister Dinah? The stories of Genesis are even morally perplexing. Rarely does the Torah pass an explicit, unequivocal verdict on people's conduct. This means that it is sometimes difficult to teach these narratives as a guide to how to behave. We know the word Torah means teaching or instruction, and it is difficult to teach ethics through stories whose characters are fraught with complexity and ambiguity. Yet the Torah does paint its characters in shades of gray. Why so? The first thing is that the moral life is not something we understand in depth all at once. As children, we hear stories of heroes and villains. We learn basic distinctions, right and wrong, good and bad, permitted and forbidden. As we grow, though, we begin to realize how difficult some decisions are. Do I go to Egypt? Do I stay in Canaan? Do I show compassion to my servant's child despite the risk that he may be a bad influence on my child who has been chosen by God for a sacred mission? Anyone who thinks such decisions are easy is not yet morally mature. So the best way of teaching ethics is to do so by way of stories that can be read at different levels, at different times in our life. Not only are decisions difficult, people are also complex. No one in the Torah is portrayed as perfect. Noah, the only person in Tanakh to be called righteous, ends drunk. Moses, Aaron, and Miriam are all punished for their sins. So is King David. Solomon, wisest of men, ends his life as a deeply compromised leader. Many of the prophets suffered dark nights of despair. There is none so righteous on earth, says Ecclesiastes, as to do only good and never sin. Even the non-heroes have their saving graces. Esau is a loving son, and when he meets his brother Jacob after a long estrangement, they kiss, embrace, and go their separate ways. Levi, condemned by Jacob for his violence, counts Moses, Aaron, and Miriam among his grandchildren. Even Pharaoh, the man who enslaved the Israelites, had a moral heroine for a daughter. The descendants of Korah sang psalms in the Temple of Solomon. This too is moral maturity, light years removed from the dualism adopted by many religions that divides humanity into children of light and children of darkness. Lastly, the Torah makes absolute distinction between earth and heaven, between God and human beings. Because God is God, there is space for humans to be human. In Torah, the line dividing them is never blurred. This is quite rare when you compare to other religions. In India, the Jaina and the Buddha, founders of two new religions in the 6th century BCE, came to be worshipped later by their followers. In China, Confucius came to be deified. To the non-Christian, Jesus seems to represent a parallel case. In Greece, the heroes of the past were held to have been seared by a god or to have been born by goddesses, and the dividing line between gods and men became fluid. In Egypt, the pharaoh was considered divine. In Torah, however, no man was ever worshipped or accorded even semi-divine status. This is one of the most extraordinary facts about the religion of the Old Testament. There never was a cult of Moses or any other biblical figure. That is why no person knows of the place of his burial until today, so that it could never become a place of pilgrimage. No religion has held a higher view of humanity than the book that tells us we are each in the image and likeness of God. Yet none has been more honest about the failings of even the greatest. God does not ask us to be perfect. He asks us, instead, to take risks in pursuit of the right and then the good, and to acknowledge the mistakes we will inevitably make. In Torah, the moral life is about learning and growing, knowing that even the greatest have failings, and even the worst have saving graces.